What does it take to become an education content creator? What do education leaders need to know about privacy issues in AI? What roles will AR and VR technologies play in the future of learning? Welcome back to another episode of the Teachers on Fire podcast, airing live on YouTube every Saturday morning at 8 a.m. Pacific and 11 a.m. Eastern. My name is Tim Cavey, and my mission here is to warm your heart, spark your thinking, and ignite your professional practice. Today's Teacher on Fire is Alfonso Mendoza Jr. Fonz is a professional learning specialist with expertise in education technology and AI in education. He hosts the My EdTech Life podcast, where he interviews EdTech startup founders, practitioners, and thought leaders. His current focus is on AI in education, or rather an AI in education initiative aimed at making technology more accessible and supportive for educators and students. Connect with Fonz at My EdTech Life on X, Instagram, YouTube, and his website, myedtech.life. Fonz, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Are you, my friend, ready to light it up?
I am definitely ready, Tim. Thank you so much again for the invitation, and it's just wonderful to be here. I know I'm a longtime listener, longtime follower. You and I go way back, and not just here in the podcast space, but just really helping each other and within communities and creatives and so on. So thank you so much for the invite. I'm glad to be here.
My friend, what an honor and a privilege. I sincerely mean that. As you said, we've been in this together for at least the last 4 years by my count, and we've had a lot of sort of ebbs and flows in our communication over that time, but I think we've probably both been encouraged by each other in that time. So this is a special treat for us to get into this conversation. Before we talk about your work and mission at My EdTech Life, I want to start with story time, Fonz. So would you mind sharing with us about a low moment or an experience of adversity that you've faced somewhere in your teaching or education career, and describe how you overcame it?
Yes, absolutely. And so I would have to start with, as far as adversity, I would say probably after 2020, we know that school shut down, COVID happened, and just being able to work with teachers and being the instructional technologist for our school district. I mean, it turned into practically like a 24-hour-a-day job, trying to help teachers set them up. You just flip the switch on going virtual, and there's definitely a lot of panic that is happening. So for me, just to be able to just, again, like I always say, improvise, adapt, and overcome, and really help the teachers and support them to just be able to log on and just bring some comfort level and some peace to them, knowing that they do have kind of like a safety net, which would be myself, and contacting me, and I can help them out and things of that sort, was something that was great. And then coming back, talk about kind of like, I want to say, the burnout kind of catching up, as far as the not sleeping well, sleeping properly, you're on call and things of that sort. So I think for me, that adversity was really just kind of really feeling that weight and that burnout, because then you're coming into the next school year, and now it's like, okay, we're opening up brick and mortar, then several shutdowns again along the way because of COVID. And it just really, physically, mentally, even spiritually, just kind of weighs down on you a lot of times. And so those were some very adverse moments, but really just to kind of overcome those things. And like I said, to each person has their own experiences, but really overcoming those things is really just a sense of contentment. And that's something that from that moment on, from like I'd say 2021 to this year, is that feeling of contentment to say, hey, looking at the positive sides of things that we do have and that we are able to do, and really overcoming and not looking at those things where we may feel like, oh, I'm deficient in this area, or maybe I don't have this, or I want that, but I can't get to it. But just really that learning how to be content, and really has helped out tremendously. And so, like I said, that's a short little abbreviated version of that. There was definitely a lot more that goes into it, as we know, our educator friends too, going through a lot of things. But I think that also changing oneself can help change the circumstances around us too as well, and not focusing too much on what is on the outside, but focus on that contentment and focus on ourselves really helps out a lot, and see things in a different perspective and in a different light and in a more positive perspective and a more positive light for sure.
I love that word contentment, Fonz, and that's really a vibe that I get consistently from you. Just that quiet peace and optimism. I really want to thank you for the energy that you share with the education community. It's really uplifting. We've got a friend here in the broadcast, another friend from Texas. Josh is checking in. Good morning to you, sir. He says, Doc Fonz.
Soon, hopefully soon.
Okay. Oh, Doctor, yes. While he mentioned that, so he referred to Fonz as Doc or Doctor. Tell us about your ongoing studies. What's going on there, Fonz?
Yes, absolutely, Tim. Thank you so much for that opportunity to share. And big shout out to my friend Josh. Yes. I appreciate you. Saludos, mi amigo. So what was happening is I am in the doctoral process, or the doctoral writing process. And so what happened is this past February, my world got flipped upside down in the sense of changing my dissertation altogether. So I had just finished in the fall my core courses. And then I was like, all right, doing the first semester of dissertation writing. And my dissertation at the time, just because it was something near and dear during the times of COVID and that experience, was just in time, teacher support or professional development through social media. As you know, Tim, we have got wonderful educators that are in the X space / Twitter space, LinkedIn, Instagram, and many other platforms that share some amazing things that it's wonderful that sometimes you may have an idea or maybe just looking for some resources or some help. You can bounce into social media, find some of the educators that may be doing something similar to what you're doing, asking them for help and things of that sort. So that was kind of my plan. What I was initially going to do. But of course, we know that November 2022 happened. And then, the introduction of artificial intelligence, ChatGPT, and then from that moment on, so many other platforms. So I went to TCEA this last year, and I want to thank TCEA also for allowing me to be a featured speaker on their AI panel, along with Matt Miller and Dr. Rochelle Poth also as well, and Dr. Nika McGee, who are amazing. And if you ever get a chance to have them on, they would be amazing too as well. I was talking to my professors there because they had a booth. And I said, hey, why do we have to write dissertations? Why can't I just do a podcast or just do a video? I just don't want writing. Why can't we change things? He said, well, we can't change the writing. However, I want to give you an idea. I said, I know that you were planning on doing this, your dissertation on just-in-time PD through social media. However, think about this. It's conversations are data. You have been talking about AI since November of 2022 till recently. He said, so why don't you just take your conversations, bring them down, transcribe them, code them, and just do your dissertation on your podcast? Because you have a timeline from 22 till most current. You've got founders, educators, creators, practitioners. So you've got a wide array of people, not only in the United States, but also overseas. So that would definitely make a really great dissertation, and from that moment on, my world got turned upside down, thinking that I'm already sitting on my dissertation and it's just a matter of pulling all that data, bringing it in, writing it up and submitting. And I just never thought about that, Tim. And so I encourage anybody, also any other podcasters or anything, conversations are data. And you can definitely use that, towards a research study and so on. So that's where I'm at right now. And it's very exciting to just be able to have that timeline in the education space from November 22nd till even yesterday when I did 2 back-to-back podcasts, and be able to put those things in there. And as fast as this is moving, it's just great to be able to document that, from that moment on.
That is super cool and makes a ton of sense. And absolutely, you've done all these dozens, hundreds of conversations. Why can't they be used in your research? Was there any kind of a hiccup or hitch in terms of the ethics application? Or whenever we begin research and postgraduate work, you have to go through that process. So was there any kind of a problem there?
No, not at all. Thankfully,
Okay.
like I said, my professors are just amazing, and they just kind of just said, "Hey, we got you. We're behind you 1,000%." And for them too, I mean, it's something that's valuable. They've just found that value in them because as they themselves are also transitioning in that space also as well, and maybe being more open to it and learning from it and sharing, it's just been something that's been wonderful and great. So we're definitely moving forward with that, and just excited that hopefully get to finish that soon. It is a tedious process. It is a lengthy process, but I know definitely it'll be worth it at the end. So soon, hopefully we'll get that project finished. And I was telling my wife, it's like, what am I going to do after I'm done with that? Like, I just can't find myself sitting still and everything. So I said, I got to plan what I'm going to be doing next, as far as maybe going for another graduate degree or something. I just got to keep busy. But she's like, no. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But, like I said, she's been the number one supporter. So big shout out and lots of love to Angelica, my wife. So, I mean, it's always great, Tim. As you know, I know that you are a family man as well. And so when you have that helpmate, that beautiful wife, alongside you to support you, it really makes a ton of difference.
I actually thought about writing that into my outline here today, Fonz, and you beat me to it. So yes, massive shout out to, we always say, our number one fans and sponsors of the podcast. Words escape me, honestly,
Yes.
because there's just so much grace and support that goes on behind the scenes. So thank you, Christine, she's not listening. She's sleeping right now. But anyway, yes, thank you, Josh, for raising that question, and commendations to you, sir, Fonz, for the journey. We're cheering you on as you approach the finish line. And I think Josh added one more comment here. Thank you, Josh, for the kind words. He says, I got to be here, 2 superstars in education. Well, I don't know about the superstars part, speaking for myself at least, but thank you, Josh. We appreciate the kind words. And if you are not connected, friends, with Josh Tovar in Texas, make sure to find him on social media. He is a machine and represents his community like few others are doing it. Well, let's get back to this conversation, Fonz. You mentioned COVID, and going back in the history books, I was able to identify April 2020 as the launch of the My EdTech Life podcast. Since then, you've published over 280 podcast episodes and more than 400 YouTube videos. Now, I noticed the YouTube channel didn't launch until, I want to say, September or October of 2020. So a little bit further behind. I'm curious to hear about that as well. Over that time, over the last 4 years, Fonz, you've earned so many different awards and recognition for your leadership in the education technology space. So congratulations on all of that. For those new to your content, tell us about your mission at My EdTech Life, and what can educators who tune in there expect to take away?
Absolutely. So, Tim, thank you so much for that. And, you mentioned COVID happened April 2020. That's when the podcast started, April 10th. And so what happened there is during that time, I was doing some work and collaborating with Global GEG, Google Educator Group, global team, with Bonnie Chalette, Stephanie Howell. I know you've had her on the show, and so many other wonderful leaders. And it was just great that during that time, we just combined forces and we were just doing webinar after webinar after webinar. And I had the opportunity to do several webinars, both in English and Spanish. So I said, hey, why don't I just try and do this locally here within my community here in the Rio Grande Valley, which is almost the most southern tip of Texas. And so I said, okay, we're going to go ahead and do that. But you know what, Tim, it just kind of changed. I said, you know what, there are many wonderful educators that are already putting out some amazing content of this sort, as far as teaching people, or teaching teachers, I should say, how to work these platforms to help during this time. And so my show kind of slowly started a little bit with that, talking tech, but then also talking to my friends that are in tech and working with tech, more of like, hey, how are you doing? How are you holding up? What are your barriers? What are your, the pain points? What are some of the wins? And it just, even though the show's called My EdTech Life, the reason for that is just because when I transitioned from educator to this current role as an instructional technologist, that was the hashtag I always used. Like, hey, this is my EdTech life. Like, this is me now. This is my era, this phase. that I'm going through. And although I know some people, people can leave reviews on your show and everything. There's some people it's like, very little tech, like this is useless and so on. And, see, sometimes it kind of discourages you. But at the same time, I said, you know what, I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. And so the conversations sometimes were very, very low tech and more of just mental health, thinking of those things because I felt that it was important as myself going through it. But now, kind of coming out of that, there's definitely a lot more tech involved. And obviously, since November 2022, there's definitely a lot of conversation surrounding generative AI. So really for all our audience members or new audience members that may want to check out the show, if you go to the website, there are some episodes there that are highly suggested that you start off with, as far as maybe diving or, kind of wetting your feet or your toes or dipping your toes into the generative AI space. But it's more of on the cautious side of things. So one of the things I do want to make clear is that I love the tech and the potential that it has. But at this time, I really don't feel safe with a lot of the transparency behind it, and obviously the terms of service and privacy aspect of it. I want to make sure that all our data, not only our teacher data and privacy is safe, but also for student data and privacy, that to be safe as well. And so those are some of the things too, that it's just really like the potential is there. But also, we just want to make sure that it's fixed and transparent. And I had a wonderful interview with a couple of founders yesterday that are doing things a little different, where they're being completely transparent. And I love that they're teachers as well as founders of this specific platform. And what they're going to be doing in these next couple of months is they're actually partnering up with universities to say, hey, we want you to research our platform. We want you to research our efficiency and efficacy in the classroom and see if we are truly making a difference within the learning landscape in the classroom, or helping teachers also as well become more efficient. So I love that honesty, that genuineness and transparency, which you often don't see in a lot of platforms out there, where it's just really like, hey, we can do this better than you, so just bring us into your classroom and we'll just do everything and that's it, and it's really more of, I guess not so much, it's more of that consumer-based generative AI. And although there are a lot of creative tools out there, I just want to make sure that to let you all know that I'm a very big proponent of that safety for our students, regardless of their 13 through 18. Parental consent too as well, making sure that parents are actually informed and are actually signing off papers too as well, allowing, or maybe not allowing their students to use or participate using these apps. So definitely a lot to unpack there. But, as far as the show is concerned, you'll see both the good, you'll see some of the maybe questionable still stuff that is out there as far as practice. And obviously the goal is to reconcile both sides and say, okay, we like what you're doing here. Well, maybe not what you're doing here, but here are some suggestions. How can we bring this together to make this space a better space for everybody?
So good. And I want to come back to those privacy and security issues in a moment, Fonz, because I know they're really important to you and they're a big focus in your work. But yes, thank you for that summary. And again, whether you're tuning in by video right now, friends, or you are listening on the audio only version of Teachers on Fire, make sure you surf on over to My EdTech Life and give Fonz a follow. You're going to be thoroughly impressed by the quality of the conversations that happen over there on a regular basis. So Fonz, if I can, I'd love to take you over to the creative journey for a moment, and then we'll make our way back to
Absolutely.
AI. So reflecting back, I've got 3 questions for you. First of all, what prompted you to begin creating content? So I guess I'm aiming this partly at any educators joining us who are maybe thinking about, hey, I wonder if I should start a podcast. I wonder if I should start an educator's YouTube channel. All right. What prompted you to begin? And I know you touched on that a little bit. It was during COVID and so on, but that's a big step. right? It is a big step to decide to get on this train. What's one lesson you learned in your first year? So maybe is there one thing you would do differently? I know I can think of a bunch of things that I wish I'd done differently. And what's one win that you've experienced as a result of the journey? So I've narrowed these down to one because I know there's probably 10 answers you could give for each of these. But let's start with what prompted you to take this step to get on the content creator's journey?
Absolutely. So really, it was just something that I guess going way back, even before getting into this role in the podcast, I just really loved just getting on my phone and just creating, learning how to use, whether it's Adobe, other platforms, just to create and edit photos and going out and taking a lot of pictures and so on. And just learning how to iterate and make things a little bit better and things of that sort. So I've always kind of had that little creative side, but it really I didn't really latch onto that until much later in my career and in life. I would probably say I was already like maybe 9 years in or 10 years into teaching when I finally started doing this. And then I started just documenting what my students were doing in the classroom and so on. And then just started posting it and started seeing like, wow, getting some traction, and then going to conferences, getting to meet some amazing people that I followed in real life, and doing those things really helped out a lot. And so, I discovered Claudio Zavala on YouTube and, at TCA. And then also one of my favorite guests, and I would say probably just a wonderful person all around too, Al Thomas, amazing creator too as well. And those two together just really, in looking at their stuff, really just kind of fueled that fire in me to just create. And many times, I would just put maybe a picture, and then the next post would be like a similar picture, just changing little things at a time, and then post a different picture. And, obviously sometimes you get a lot of hate, whether it's in your comments or DMs, like, hey, like you just keep posting the same picture and so on. But I was like, but things are different. It's like iteration and so on. And so one time I just reached out to Al and said, hey man, like, this is what I'm going through. Like I'm kind of like in this little creative phase and doing things and so on. And he's like, dude, just keep doing what you're doing. He goes, there's always going to be somebody who is always going to just find that one little thing, to just kind of pull you down. He goes, you keep doing what you're doing because you're the one learning and you're the one benefiting from it. But others that will look at that stuff will also benefit and learn, and you might inspire somebody. And for me, it's always been about giving back to him. Like if there's something that I can do that can just spark either just some knowledge nuggets or just spark just some momentum in what they're trying to do. I mean, to me, that's what it's all about. So I started doing that. But then, like I said, it wasn't until 2020, Chris Nesi, we know Chris Nesi, he just said, hey man, just click record. That's it. And I just clicked record, or in this case, go live. And we went live and started creating content, like I said, through the podcast and doing things live. And now, putting out content through clips and so on, and just putting out and amplifying voices. And I think that's one of the things, Tim, that I attribute to being an only child. The fact that I really didn't have, and especially where we lived, there weren't too many other children my age around me, like in the neighborhood, obviously in school and so on. But being an only child, I didn't have any brothers, sisters, obviously. But when I had a new friend that I would meet at school, and then they'd invite me over to their house, man, they had their siblings there, the parents were there, and I would just sit there and just listen to their stories. So just huge on storytelling. And I think that that's why I love to amplify voices, whether it be educator, creator, founder, you name it. I've had a little bit of everything on my show, because I believe that by giving somebody a space that they may not have, or maybe they've never had the opportunity to share, that could be something that's huge for them. And it could be a springboard to get them either to podcast, create, write a book, be a better educator, put themselves out there a little bit more, and overcome that imposter syndrome. So to me, that's what fills my bucket. Obviously, the professional development, I call it, that's personal to me for that hour. But then in the end, I get to share it with everybody that listens to the podcast. So those are some of the things that I love about it. As huge lesson learned. Number one, if I can go back now, I would probably have started with a better microphone. That's my lesson number one there. Start off with a very good mic. It doesn't have to run you that expensive. For $50, you can get a really nice mic, but starting off with good sound will really help and get that a long way and make, your content will start being crisp. Nowadays with cameras, even, as long as it's a 1080, whether it's a webcam, your phones, you've got cameras, don't worry about spending too much on that yet, unless you're really taking this seriously. But number one lesson, get yourself good sound. You'll be good to go. And some of the wins, really, it's just like I said, for me personally, being able to give and amplify voices, give a space to otherwise unheard voices that may not have an opportunity elsewhere and just help them. But also some of the wins too have been just some of the recognition that has come just through the podcast and putting yourself out there. That has really helped out a lot. And it's not that you're seeking it. It just really just comes because I guess either people really identify with the content or they just see like, hey, we're just amplifying voices. Whatever the case is, it's just been a wonderful journey, Tim, and definitely has helped overcome imposter syndrome, like I mentioned from way back when, not comparing myself to others, because that's another thing I want to add to anybody that might be interested. There's still so much space within any niche that you're in. Because although you may be like, I had this conversation with Chris when I was on his podcast. He said, both of us have a tech podcast, but we just do things a little different. So we're still in the same space. So the delivery is different. The layout is different. Format is different. So don't let that discourage you either. That just because you see somebody else doing it already doesn't mean that you can't do it yourself either. It's all in the delivery and the way that you present the content.
Yeah, I've held on to the advice that no one does it like you, right? So even if you feel that a space is saturated, for people who are really keen on the topic and keen on the education niche or the conversations happening, a high tide lifts all boats, I think is the expression, right? So people will jump from Fonz to Tim or Tim to Fonz, and we find each other that way. And I think we all win. So this idea that the competition is too fierce or there's too much saturation, I don't think it holds water. I had one question about you going live in 2020. Was that originally on Zoom, Fonz, or did you use this tool? Right now we're using a platform called StreamYard. Yeah. Were you on StreamYard right at the very beginning?
Yes, I was on StreamYard right at the very beginning because that's what Global GEG was using at that time. Obviously, it was the free version. But then when I started the show, then I said, okay, I'm going to upgrade because I just want all the features just to start off with that. So from that moment on, that's when it started. And then just real quick to come back to your question that you said about the YouTube channel. What happened is at that time, my main account was Tech Teacher 1381. But then I started My EdTech Life. So you'll see some of the first episodes on Tech Teacher 1381. And then what I did is I kind of downloaded them from there and uploaded them into My EdTech Life to kind of just bring everything over. And so My EdTech Life now has become my, primary account for all things. And so that's why you kind of saw that the YouTube channel started a little later.
I see. And have you, on that note, by the way, Fonz, have you actually closed down your Tech Teacher account on X? I was trying to find it the other day and I couldn't, but... No,
actually I haven't. It's still there. Okay. And I don't know why, Tim. I think it's just, I'll be honest with you, like I could be a digital hoarder. And so I just haven't, kind of just close that off for some reason. I don't know if it's just that sentimental value of like, hey, this is where it all started. And you just kind of want to hold on to those things, even though I may not use it. But eventually, the time will come where I'll have to sunset that and just say, hey, this is my primary account and do that. And it, again, like you said, I think I just have to do it. And it's like that Band-Aid. I just kind of have to rip it off and just make it happen.
No. Well, actually, I mean, this is a bit of a tangent, but I suspect some of our viewers might be interested in this little subtopic. But I think there's a place for having a content brand. So for me, it's at Teachers on Fire and having a teacher account or a professional account, because sometimes I'm at a conference and I want to live tweet through a whole session, and maybe it's a local conference. It's just not appropriate for my Teachers on Fire account, but it may be very appropriate here or in the area that I live. And there are other things that I want to share from my school or my local setting that are appropriate on my teacher account that are just not really applicable to my Teachers on Fire audience. So I am a big believer actually in having both accounts. So I don't consider it hoarding. In fact, you're probably I probably have much bigger problems in terms of hoarding, but we'll talk about multiple social media accounts later. But at any rate, yeah, thanks for taking us on that journey, Fonz. That was super interesting, and I know for anyone who is in the creative space or considering jumping into the creative game, everything you just shared will be very, very interesting for them. Fonz, let's come back to AI. And you really are the AI expert right now. You've been doing all of this research. That's the nature of the interviews, as you shared a few moments ago. So you mentioned the privacy and security issues. I know you already covered part of this, but what should educators and education leaders be thinking about perhaps as we head into fall 2024? We're thinking about embracing these different AI tools. Some of them are, let's say, just in the general public, the ChatGPTs of the world. Some are aimed at teachers, the magic schools, and then others are aimed at students. I know there's so much here, and I'm quite aware that you could fill 50 pages answering this question, but what do you think we should be thinking about in terms of privacy and security?
Yes, absolutely. And that is a great question, Tim, because this is something, and I'll be honest with you, like when this whole thing started, I was just so excited about it. Yeah. It was something new. It was novel. And I was like, oh my goodness, as a teacher, this is what we can do. I mean, it's going to expedite things. It's going to, take some of those menial tasks and, it's going to facilitate certain things that otherwise teachers, it takes a lot of time from the teacher's planning to do, maybe even if it's just, sending a simple email, things of that sort. And so I was all about that hype until what happened is that January, I started my last semester of coursework through my doctoral program. And so this was something that was so new. One of my classes was EdTech Trends. And so I said, hey, I want to write about AI. And even my prof was like, well, this is too new. Do you think that you can find some research on it? And I was like, absolutely. Like, I'm in it. And so my paper that I did, it was a short paper. It was talking about AI. And I was just going into it like, yeah, this is going to be amazing. Like, I want to write about this because this is going to change things. And it will eventually, once we get it done right. But then that's when I started seeing the side that people don't talk about, which is the data privacy, the safety features on that, obviously the age restrictions, the large language models, how they're trained, and how, it's just really it's just really a statistical way of them just putting the best words together, pretty much like it's like a linear equation, basically. It's just statistically, predicting the next word. So I was like, wait a minute. Well, this is not what I thought it was going to be. Now, mind you, I am not against like teacher facing, Gen AI, because you as an adult have the responsibility of what you're going to be putting in your students' hands. My concern is that, obviously that data, is gathered from the teacher's use. What is it used for? And if you go into the terms and services of a lot of the platforms, what they'll say is like, hey, we don't save your data. We don't do this. We don't do that. Or we just save your logins. But if you continue, a lot of people just stop there and be like, oh, okay, I see COPPA, I see FERPA, I see this. But as you continue going on and on, because there's a terms option, and then there's a privacy option sometimes on a different tab that sometimes it's very hidden at the very bottom of those web pages, you'll see that it says your data will be used for our third parties, and then they'll list the third parties, which will say OpenAI. And we know that the OpenAI age restriction is with parental consent, 13 years and older with parental consent. If you're an adult, you don't have to worry about that. So for me, that is a huge red flag, because essentially what we're doing is we're taking these tools that are really meant for the business sector, and we try and fit them into the education space very quickly and very rapidly. And so I think that there needs to be just a little bit of a pause there for educators to really think and say, okay, as an adult, I have the opportunity to give consent or not give consent for this application to save my data or not save my data. But when you're using the student facing AI as a teacher, let me ask you this. Are you getting a signature from a parent stating that, yes, your student or the student can use this platform? And a lot of the apps you'll see, and these are a lot of very, I would say, popular apps that are out there that are using kind of like these chatbot apps and so on. If you look at their terms of service, also as well, it says we will check to see if there is parental consent. But do they really? I want to know how many, and I'm questioning them too. And I really don't speak out too much about this on my platform, but when I do get to do it on a podcast, I will. It's like my challenge is I want to see where the students are signing off, because they'll say, well, it's local parentis. I was like, no. I was like, because if a school district has the form that they sign at the beginning of the year, how many of those schools also have revisited and reworded stating we will be using these Gen AI tools, which can also do this, save this data, use this information, and use this for this. Will you allow us to use it? And do they really inform the parents with the jargon that they put? Many times parents just go sign off and they don't understand. So for me, it's about keeping the parents in the loop, keeping the teachers in the loop of those things, because Tim, honestly, I'm just scared that if something happens, who's going to be responsible for that? Is it going to be the platform? And the platform clearly states, if anything goes wrong, you cannot do anything against us. What you will need to do is you will need to talk to our third parties, which are OpenAI and Amazon and so on. And I don't know if a school district has enough funds to go up against those giants in case there is some litigation. But there's always that disclaimer. If anything goes wrong, we are not responsible. And I really don't like that, because if you're putting out a platform, I want you to be responsible if anything were to happen.
Can I jump in there?
Yes, of course.
So a couple of things come to mind. I want to come back to the layers of this, and I'm thinking specifically of Canva apps. So I'm just going to put that as a placeholder and come back to that in a moment. But tell us about the worst case scenario. So I think we're all sort of vaguely aware that a lot of the platforms and tools that we use are storing our information on an aggregate macro kind of level. So they are able to, I'm 45 years old, so they're able to track 45-year-old men, often search for this. They often express interest in this. They seem to want to be able to figure out this. Those kinds of data collection, for me, don't really bother me, because they're anonymized. If some company has, the picture of trends for 45-year-old men, that's fine. And if my data is a part of that, that's fine. I think maybe what you're getting at is the idea of a data leak or specific students being exposed. Tell us more about what are you picturing in the worst case scenario?
Yes, absolutely. So number one, worst case scenario is, where is the data stored? I mean, you've got companies that are from overseas that are being used here. So is my data stored here locally in the US, or is this something that's stored overseas? Is it crossing state lines? Because even then, that's something that is dangerous, and that's something that needs to be said. Where is the student data stored? Because again, remember, the more layers too that you add to this, the more danger there is as far as, the personal identifiable information, and of course with data breaches and information that can kind of funnel, away like student outcomes, or funnel, even adult outcomes or teacher outcomes. So that's my big fear, Tim. And the reason that I say that is because, as you know, and maybe you've heard, and maybe of our audience members have heard, is that Texas has gone to grading essays, using a language model. They pop that in. And so my first question was to some of my content, or the content specialist, not my content specialist, but the district content specialist. I was asking them, I was like, guys, is there an identifier, for example, if a student, say Juan Mendoza, submits this test and it's being graded, is there an identifier like a name or anything? It's like, well, no, it's just a number. But I'm assuming that with that number, there's a name attached. So I want to say, like, is there a difference in the grading between Juan Mendoza and Tim Cavey because of the name? So those are some of the dangers and some of the things that I also think about. You know, is this going to be grading properly? Is this machine calibrated enough to be able to say, hey, even though Juan Mendoza, you know, maybe is an emergent bilingual, am I grading this properly in the sense that understanding that they are an emergent bilingual and maybe they don't deserve a 0, but they end up getting a 0 because it's Juan Mendoza and they don't have that information or that context. Whereas opposed Tim Cavey, oh, give them a 5, even though they answered, you know, wrote 2 sentences because it's Tim Cavey, you know, the name, things of that sort. So those are some of the dangers too that I think about. And so being here from Texas, that's the first thing that came to mind. The next thing, Tim, is as a teacher, Tim, many times we get very excited about what we see at conferences. And we definitely, and don't get me wrong, I'm like that too. And I was like that for many years, where I just want to try the next best thing, the next tool, and just bring it into the classroom. And oftentimes it's like, hey, we can't log in, but I'll create it through my personal account. But now just so we can use the apps and bypass, you know, districts, whatever they had, just so my students can use it because I thought that it was going to make things a lot better, or, you know, for instruction. Some, you know, did what they were told, what they said to do, and it was great. But then at the end, now I'm thinking, it's like, oh my goodness, you know, in the end, what if this platform that gives student feedback maybe gives feedback that is either something happens because there is no control over it. And the reason that I say that, Tim, is because we know that many of these platforms plug in to the third party, which would be OpenAI or somebody else. And they always say, well, we can put guardrails on this. But how can you put guardrails on something that you don't own or you're completely tethered to, you know? And so my thing is what if there's something that's inappropriate, that can be harmful, and so on? And that's just my concern, just for that safety of a child shouldn't be able to see something as far as an output that they shouldn't see. And then in the end, I don't want a good, solid teacher with good intentions that because this app was introduced to get in trouble or something were to happen, you know, maybe lose a job because of that, you know? So that's what concerns me. And don't get me wrong. Like I said, I love the potential that generative AI has and what it can do for education. But I'm just with those, it's just those concerns, Tim. From the bottom of my heart, I always tell people, like, just be cautious, be very cautious.
Yeah, I was wondering if let's call it the counselor coaching aspect of generative AI, this idea that let's say a 13-year-old student could go to one of these models or ChatGPT, let's say, and say, I'm depressed. What should I do? Or, you know, sort of go. And we know that's happening already, that bots are let's say, counseling students. And so I don't know if that fits into this question. I don't know if we call that a security issue. What I was wondering, Fonz, going into this question is, are you picturing sort of a massive data leak at some point down the road? Right now, there's an Ashley Madison documentary on Netflix, right, about this big data leak where all these like heavily sensitive profiles were all leaked to the public. And I was wondering, is that one of your concerns, that with all of these different third parties, is it going to be possible that Juan Mendoza's search history or prompt history is leaked somewhere?
Yeah.
And you didn't mention that, but I suppose that has to be one of your concerns as well.
Yeah, that too as well, Tim. You know, obviously with anything that's happened, and we know that school districts are privy. I mean, the school districts, it happens all the time where, and it's not at any fault of the school district either. Many times it could just be fault of the app. Maybe there could be some, you know, something that happens within the district, whatever the case is, but that data gets out. I mean, I've had emails that'll come in that say, hey, like your password has been compromised, and you get the Google little notification, like, or your password has shown up on a list of so many other passwords and so on. So it's kind of those things too as well, where that information gets out and gets used gets used in a malintentioned way, obviously. And, the thing too is that being able to get this information from students, now what we may be seeing is that now it could be very dangerous as far as the bad actors that are out there have student information that can be used. And as we've seen now, even too, just with photos and deep fakes and things of that sort, which that's something a little different. But yes, Tim, because we don't know where that data is stored, I want to make sure that CTOs know that, hey, ask these questions, as tough as it may be. Ask those questions like, is the data stored locally or is this going to go overseas? And because now you're going to think, well, if it's going to go over there, I don't have control over it. Who's going to control it? And then if something happens over there, how quickly can I be notified so that I can take action and protect the student and the integrity of their data and their privacy as well? So definitely a lot of stuff going on there.
When it comes to data storage, Fonz, now this might be an ignorant point of view, but I assume all of the big companies are doing so much server mirroring around the world to establish redundancy that I just feel like our data is everywhere. Yeah. I don't know how accurate that is. There was one other piece, and I hope I'm not belaboring the point, but this is really good stuff, and I know you know a lot about the space. When I go into Canva, so my school has a list of like 20 apps and tools that are presented to parents. Parents sign off on them. Or pardon me, we changed that a little bit so that it's an informed consent situation this year. So we're not chasing signatures, but we're letting parents know these are the apps and tools that we use. So my students, let's say elementary students, are signing into Canva using their Google credentials, their school credentials. But a tricky aspect of this now that I'm thinking through is that Canva has all of these embedded apps, all of these third-party apps. So a lot of them are AI. So students there's sort of a second login within Canva. Do you see what I'm getting at? So they try this app or that app, and they're trying speech to text, or they're trying, whatever. Should all of those, I think I know the answer here, but should all of those apps also be presented to parents and permission obtained for those as well?
I would say just for caution's sake, that's it. Like, because we know that because of maybe the way the wording was, and maybe the parent says, oh, well, they're just using Canva, but they didn't realize that connection.
That's the tricky part.
It just, Tim, really what it comes down to, it's to alleviate some of that. I always tell, educators or anybody that I speak with too as well. It's simple communication with parents. A lot of times,
transparency.
I always say, we use the term learning community, but it's sometimes in a lot of places it excludes parents because it's just like, superintendent, administrators, teachers, and students, and it stops there. But, we really need to just have those conversations and so on. And also just doing due diligence with anybody that is in your tech department, from your CTOs to network specialists. Just look at these apps, vet them, look at terms of service. And if maybe there's a way that you can, because I'm not too familiar with that back end yet, but maybe there's a way to just block some of those third party. And then just the students are using just that creative side of Canva for their assignments and not diving into things where, later on they can, create or try to create something that might be inappropriate, or just, we want to avoid those things too as well.
We do. Just before I lose the thought, I initiated a trial edition, I guess, of Gemini embedded right within Gmail and Google Docs for this Teachers on Fire account. And I'm really amazed at what Gemini in Docs can do, just the help me write prompt. And it functions just like ChatGPT, very similar. So I'm sort of envisioning a day when Gemini will be ubiquitous throughout Google. And wow, that's going to be a very different landscape. So just wanted to throw that in there as well. I don't know if you've played with Gemini within the Google ecosystem or embedded within Docs, but what is your general message to educators for a teacher who has been, I won't say under a rock, but they've stayed purposely at the sidelines to this point. Should they start to play with AI tools this summer and familiarize themselves, or to the primary teachers who maybe their learners are not on screens a whole lot? Is this a topic that they can sort of sidestep for the time being? What's your thought on direction for the fall?
Yeah, the direction for the fall, obviously for teachers that are out there right now in the summer. I know that you've been hearing a lot about this and even throughout the year, and maybe it's just something that you've put off because let's face it, Tim, there's a lot of things too, like curriculum, you got to meet certain deadlines, you got to get students ready for state testing. So even like a lot of the new tech, right now, even for teachers, just to add to their plate can be something that's overwhelming. But even during the summer, it is something that I would suggest for teachers to just look into research, understand also, the terms of service. You as an adult, can figure those out. Like, what do you want to put in? Do you want to sign in? Do you not want to sign in? But again, even though what I talked about, you may feel like, oh, no, I don't even want to touch that anymore. There is so much potential for this if it work once we get it to work correctly, and then we just become more transparent and we get everything down. Like, this can definitely, I feel, can shape education and can really help teachers and students also as well enhance their learning. But for my teacher friends out there that may be just hesitant, slowly just dip your toes into it. You don't have to go like really hard and really deep, because I'm pretty sure that you will get some training along the way, come summertime as school is starting to, get ready to pick up before the fall and so on. So I know that many districts out there also will be adopting a lot of apps, but they'll also be adopting a lot of policy too as well. So I just encourage you just to exercise caution. And I'm going to use the words of Dr. Nika McGee, who is a great friend. To big shout out to Dr. Nika McGee, is just be a cautious advocate. So that's really what it is. And that's what I'm trying to do. I know that for a lot of us, we may feel uncomfortable with the tech as is. But again, like I always said, just, get clicky with it, have fun, enjoy it, see the potential of how you might be able to add this to your workflow. The only thing that I do caution, though, is really on the student-facing AI. And what I mean by that is not necessarily like, there's some platforms out there like the chatbots and things of that sort. Just be very cautious, with those things, and understand too that all the outputs that they do get are not necessarily 100% accurate. So teachers, my big advice to you is, as the school year begins and you start using a lot of apps where it'll produce something for you, please make sure that you revise what is there and don't take that first output to be true gospel and then just say, hey, I'm going to share this with my students, and you're giving them something that is inaccurate. So as good as the tech can be, we just want to make sure that we revise it, we edit, and we make it something that falls in line with your learning objectives and with your curriculum. But it can definitely help expedite a lot of things.
It's great advice. A quick question for you. Are you an accept all cookies or reject all cookies kind of person?
I am a accept all cookies.
Yeah, me too. And, I have some students who respond to me with horror, like, you accept the cookie? And I can tell they've been coached by their parents to always decline. But my answer usually is like, hey, do you want advertising that is actually suited to your interests and browsing habits, or do you want to see like the craziest ads ever? I mean, to me, that's what it usually boils down to. But
yeah, and just one more thing, Tim, that I wanted to add in, and I'm sure, obviously with digital literacy, and we talk a lot about that, and of course the AI literacy, but digital citizenship, I think those all go hand in hand. So I think honestly, for a lot of school districts that are out there that have done a really good job in promoting digital citizenship, that can easily transfer over to AI literacy too, as well, as a lot of the things will overlap. And I think that that's something that's very important too, as well, is just really talking to the students and, hey, what are you creating? What information are you putting out? And obviously whatever it is that you put out, keep in mind that once you click send or share and all those things, it's really hard for you to take that back, and it's out there. So it kind of goes in line with a lot of those things too, as well. And I think that this year, 2024, will be a year where I truly believe that we will be making more, we'll be moving forward more in a more cautious yet exhilarating, fun way that we're slowly going to start seeing that the generative AI and a lot of the tools that are out there are going to start making that difference, because now we'll start having more research and we'll be able to see the efficacy, the efficiency, and we will see if engagement does equal learning, or are we just seeing that the students are just, I'm one and done and that's it. I don't care about this. And so hopefully we'll start seeing some things and some trends in a positive way.
You mentioned Gen AI literacy, and I think that is so key. And I guess my message to Common Sense Media and the great people at Common Sense Media or Common Sense Education, who I rely on heavily for some really quality digital citizenship materials and resources, please start to integrate more AI literacy content over there. I would be so appreciative, and I know I wouldn't be the only teacher in that position. Let's shift gears a little bit, Fonz, toward the metaverse. Now, you have a well-made and well-viewed video on your channel that was titled, How Will the Metaverse Change Education? That was a couple of years ago, though.
Yeah.
And it feels like some of the buzz around the metaverse has melted away. So 2 years removed from that video and moving forward, do you feel like there is still a role for AR and VR in the future of our learning communities? Or is that something that will just remain on the sidelines for the foreseeable future?
Yeah, Tim, that is a great question. And I'll be honest with you, a lot of the times these last couple of years, I definitely felt a lot of hype around, wow, this is amazing. This is something that's really going to change and revolutionize education and things of that sort, as far as the metaverse is concerned. And, but what happened is, I think that because of what we saw with NFTs and a lot of that happening, a lot of that buzz went away because of a lot of bad actors. And it just really felt like, man, this was just a sham. Now, there are still some great, solid people that are doing some work and trying to really make this work and try to get this to be something that can be for good, obviously. But I think what happens is that right now, a lot of those resources and a lot of that infrastructure can be very pricey and very expensive and so on, as far as that whole metaverse and so on. Now, there's a great group, the ED3 DAO, that are still doing a lot of work with that too, and really still showing the positive and the upside of the metaverse. Now, for myself, as far as the AR, VR, there's definitely room for that too as well, Tim. But I think what happens, and I'm going to be honest with you, that I think this is going to be a conversation that's going to repeat itself, is what happens is with the AR, VR, a lot of it is that hardware. And the hardware, and then a lot of the platforms and things of that sort, a lot of CTOs don't want to open up their firewalls, because keep in mind, for any platform out there, it's a privilege to be able to go through a district's firewall. So, you want to make sure that you do things correctly. And what happens is that it seems like there's more of that consumer-based products that are being brought in, as opposed to the education-based. Now, the education-based products would definitely be a lot easier to implement, as far as for a CTO to kind of feel safe, because it's strictly for education. But what happens, Tim, is that school districts like myself, where I'm at, would definitely get priced out of any of that hardware or technology. So I think what happened here is that too also kind of just diminished too as well, that hype. Now, I'm not saying that these phones aren't powerful enough, but you can do something with your lessons, screen mirror, things of that sort, and you really don't need to have something for all 25 students. But again, it just all depends on the teacher. I think even with AI, what we're going to do is we're going to start seeing that conversation. As again, I had this conversation with Dee Lanier and Ken Shelton yesterday on the podcast I recorded, was district like mine too is going to get priced out. We always throw the word equity around and so on. But then I'm out, I'm priced out, because other school districts that are bigger than mine definitely get to take advantage of that. But why doesn't mine? And there isn't a price point for us too as well, where they can go ahead and kind of level things out to where everybody has access. So I think that's where we are with that. I mean, don't get me wrong, I was very hypeful and hopeful during that time that things were going to change because I was in it. Like, I believe in it. And then, sometimes, things don't come to fruition, and you kind of just have to take a step back again and just be that cautious advocate, and then just see where this is going and see what you can do if there's anything that can be done. But the technology is there. I know it's something that is being used in, a lot of the universities, and it's still going strong for them. And I think obviously because they have more funds, there are a lot of school districts around here that do use it too as well, but not as many as there should be. And again, going back to getting priced out, with a lot of that's happening. But again, I always remain hopeful of the tech, that eventually there will be a time where all students can have access to the best possible tools, instruments, and learning altogether.
Well, there's no question that Mark Zuckerberg made his big play on the metaverse, changing at least the official name of Facebook over to Meta. And we see Apple doing a lot with the Apple
Vision Pro.
Thank you, the Vision Pro. So they are investing in it. So it's coming along. It's going somewhere. We don't see it in our schools on a widespread basis just yet, but it's going somewhere. Fonz, I've taken a ton of your time. Are you ready to do about 5 minutes can we try to do a rapid fire round as we
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Let's do it.
Teachers, if you're enjoying this conversation, consider adding the Teachers on Fire YouTube channel to your morning commute. Start your day on fire. Outside of education, Fonz, what's another area of learning for you?
Outside of education, another area of learning for me is really the content creation side aspect of it. This is also just outside of education. This is what really also fills my bucket, Tim. And anytime I have a wonderful conversation like the one that I'm having right now with you, and when I do the podcast, it's something that is so fulfilling. But for learning, it's really the workflow. What tools are out there? You want to put out the best product. How can I, put out, on separate platforms, and learning all the intricacies of that. And Tim, I have you to thank too as well, and everybody in our Voxer group, with all the tips that you share about what you hear as far as algorithms and how things are working. And we're able to give each other feedback or hear feedback from things that you've tried. So we all continue to learn. And I think that that's a wonderful learning community too as well. But definitely outside of education, podcasting and video workflow and content creation, that's definitely something that I love.
Tell us about one personal habit or productivity hack, Fonz, that contributes to your success, allows you to do everything that you do, and keeps your fire burning on a daily basis.
All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you something that has really helped me out. And again, always, in any time, any place, anywhere, this has been what's kept me solid and just kept me going for this long. And it's really the power of prayer. That is my daily habit. Every morning, every evening, and anytime during the day when things may not look so great, it's always the power of prayer. And that is where I get that contentment from, and that different perspective of, hey, things happen for a reason, circumstances happen for a reason. But I'm a true believer, honestly, that all things work together for good. And so that's where I've learned that contentment, and I just hold on to that. And it really helps fuel that fire to be able to do so many things, being a multi-passionate creative. But that's really where I get that strength and just really just wisdom from too as well.
I'll add my amen to that. Well said, brother. Point to an EdTech tool that you currently love using somewhere in your professional practice. We've talked about StreamYard. Is there another tool that you're really enjoying right now that I wonder if some educators need to know about?
There is a tool that is called Kapwing. Okay, Kapwing, and there is an educator account. So please make sure that you sign up. You may need to just go to Kapwing Education, or just kind of Google it, and you get a free account as an educator. And it is a great platform to be able to create videos for your students, repurpose videos also as well. It has subtitles. It'll even translate the subtitles for you. It'll dub your videos too for you as well in multiple languages. So that's one of the tools that I know I've been sharing a lot at TCEA, and a lot with other colleagues. So Kapwing.com, Kapwing, wonderful platform as well.
When I see that one, I always wonder, is it Kapwing or Kapwing? So I know now.
Yeah, actually, it's Kapwing. I saw one of the clips from the founder, and I love the story behind it because it's from Calvin and Hobbes, where Calvin and Hobbes, there's like a little cartoon, and I guess he's shooting kind of like a little fake gun. So the sound of the bullet is Kapwing when it bounces. So that's what they named it.
It's some onomatopoeia there. Recommend a book, one that you've been reading lately, or maybe one of your all-time faves, and tell us why you recommend it.
Okay, so I'm going to do 2 books real quick, Tim. So the first one that I'm going to do is Beyond the Bulletin Board and Crafting a Culture of Content Creation. And this is Jed Stefanowicz. Sorry, Jed. This book is something that is great that can help any teacher, even at any level, kind of spice up their lessons in a very low tech, low barrier to entry way. And really what I love is the premise of this, and the way the book is called Beyond the Bulletin Board is because it's taking those bulletin board projects that you normally do to kind of either for open house or decorate, but just taking it to that next level of by possibly maybe adding some video reflection and things of that sort to get student thought process. Obviously, with the student reflection and video, there's language acquisition too that takes place. Obviously, a learning artifact for any meetings, whether it's IEPs, 504s, ARDs, and all of those meetings in case the student may need additional supports. And it's just a great learning artifact for parents to say, oh, wow, like, I see my child's thought process and look at the way they see things differently and so on. So it's a great book, very easy to read and with a lot of helpful tips. And obviously the book that I just got recently this week that I definitely recommend for any teachers is this one, The Promise and Perils of AI in Education. And that's Ken Shelton and Dee Lanier that we recorded a podcast yesterday, and that'll be out this coming week. Great book, and it's easy to read. A lot of helpful information there for any teacher at any level or any professional or educator at any level to read through and understand a little bit more about that backside that is really not discussed too much because of the AI hype.
Tell us about someone that we need to follow on Education X, Instagram, or LinkedIn, and share why they've been inspiring you lately.
Yeah, okay. So number one, I'm always going to go shout out to my boy, Jorge Valenzuela. Definitely follow him. A lot of great stuff there that he puts out on his podcast, and he does some amazing work through Solution Tree. And really, he's been on the podcast, and the way that he talks to you, and he's there with you. He's present, and the way that he shares that knowledge is also wonderful. Also, I can't forget Josh Tovar too. Josh Tovar, big shout out to him. Definitely follow him. And there is also another gentleman on X who I follow, Zach Bauermaster, who is a principal, and he actually has a book here. I had the book here, but I guess I put it somewhere else and I can't find it, but it is a wonderful book for principals, leadership, and it's really also through prayer. He is a Christian, but the way that he talks about leadership and leading others, it just brings some peace to you. So for anybody that is in a leadership position, anybody that is a believer, you can definitely read that book, and it can bring some peace of mind. And even if you're not, it can bring peace of mind too to help in your situations and just how to navigate that leadership space as well.
Some great titles there. As a support to my work here at Teachers on Fire, Fonz, now you've produced these 280 plus podcast episodes. Who's been a guest that you would say, man, Tim, you've got to have this person on. They were electric. They brought a lot of value, perhaps in recent months.
Absolutely. Tim, my number one that you would need to have is Dr. Nika McGee, who would probably take what I just said and put it in a simplified way. And she's very knowledgeable and probably just, more calm than I am, as you know, that's just me and my personality. But Dr. Nika McGee, please look her up. I'll probably message her right now and say, hey, be on the lookout for a message from Tim Cavey. I would also definitely recommend, if you can get them on, you can have Ken and Dee Lanier, Ken Shelton, Dee Lanier. Fantastic. Talk about energy, like you're mentioning, amazing guests. And also, I don't know, have you had George yet on the show?
As part of a group panel.
Oh, no. Yeah, you need to get him on just as a guest by himself. He's been on my show. And like I said, he just puts you at so much peace, and just the knowledge that he has, and especially with leadership and you being a vice principal and maybe aspiring to that next role or whatever. And for all your audience members too, he would be fantastic. So those would be my 4 recommendations right now off of the top of my head.
Wait, were you talking George Valenzuela?
Yeah, George Valenzuela.
Oh, okay. Yes, I need to make that happen.
Yes.
I thought for a moment you were talking about George Kouros, another big George out there.
Okay.
But yes, okay. I'm glad I clarified that. Last one, as we start to wrap up, just for fun, what are you streaming during your downtime? What are you and the missus watching and relaxing to when you've got no brain power left for anything productive?
So the missus and I, we're big into cooking shows. So it's been a while since we were catching up actually on what's called Bake Off over there in the UK, but here it's like the Great British Baking Show. And so we just love watching that, and just the competitions, and we just, the pastries and so on. And I might say that it is very dangerous when the missus and I are checking that out, because all of a sudden it's like, hey, it's like, we need to snack on something. So we're just snacking continually during that. But, that's what we binge on. Obviously, that's something that we love. And there's just something about just the art of cooking and cooking shows. So we'll check that out, and Iron Chef. So anything that deals with culinary arts, huge fans of that for sure.
Fonz, for those interested in AI, I think you're a must follow. What are the best ways for the listeners and viewers to reach out and connect with you and your work?
Absolutely. You can visit our website at myedtech.life, where you can check out 282 amazing episodes. Probably I'd say that the last 100 or so have been dealing with AI. So if you want to hear a little bit about how AI has changed from November 2022 all the way to its current state, you will definitely find a lot of stuff there in between that maybe you hadn't heard of. And, founders, creators, a lot of platforms that are out there, and some may not be out there anymore, just depending, but it's definitely something that is great. So visit our website there at myedtech.life, and you can please follow us on all socials at My EdTech Life. And then if you can, Tim, if you don't mind me plugging, please visit our YouTube channel also as well. We're very close to getting to 1,000 subscribers. We would definitely love to get to 1,000 subscribers by the end of this year. And, just being able to share that with Tim here will definitely help out too as well. So thank you so much for all of your support as always.
For sure. Well, Fonz, I have to attribute your listeners, your viewing community, to coming on board the show, because we've had a great number of live viewers with us this morning. So thank you so much. If I make a visit over to My EdTech Life, I don't know if I can return the favor, but we'll certainly make a try of it.
You've been on the show, and it was great, but I would definitely love to have you back as a 2-time guest. And I think that would be something that would be amazing for sure.
Well, and it was not my intention to invite myself, but yes, I would love to come on and chat with you anytime. Fonz, thank you so much for sharing your time with the podcast today. Something we didn't mention is that we were really held back this morning by a technical difficulty at this platform, StreamYard, that kept us off air. So you've been hanging out with me for quite a while, my friend. Thank you so much for your generosity. Teachers on Fire, whether you're viewing or listening on the audio-only version, I'm your host, Tim Cavey, and I'm so grateful that you decided to spend some of your day listening to this podcast. I hope that in some way the content you heard today from Fonz Mendoza of My EdTech Life sparked your thinking and ignited your practice. And I'll meet you next week right here on the Teachers on Fire podcast. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Slow, you can still go. Even when there's no hope, you can still go. I never answer to no, man, I still go.